Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome back to my Wednesday lives where I'm talking about sales for introverts. And I'm so excited to talk today about something that is, I think the bane of every designer's existence, right? And it is um, going and setting expectations for clients. Hey, Andra, nice to see you. Thank you. I'm glad you like my pink jacket. It's actually vintage. I've had this one forever. Someday I'll do a whole series on clothes that I've had for like 30 years and things that I've picked up along the way. But thank you. I love my pink and it makes me feel happy on a Wednesday. So thank you. Hey, Lori Lou, good to see you. And Oakwood Tree Service, good to see you. Glad you're here. So today we're going to be talking about client expectations and how we can better manage those expectations moving forward. Now, of course, we can first talk about why this is important. And I'm sure you've all had situations where you've gotten into a project and what you're thinking is the expectation is one thing. And as you get into the project, you're realizing that maybe you and the clients have different expectations. It could be expectations on the order of things or the timing of a project. Um, all of these things come up, how the process works and all of that. And so today we're going to talk about ways that you can mitigate that expectation. But one of the things that I want you guys to be aware of is, have you ever heard the saying that you don't know what you don't know? And a lot of times clients just simply don't know. So if you're running across a client who's never worked with you before or never worked with a designer before, this is the time that you want to be talking about setting expectations and setting boundaries and discussing how you work. So I want to tell you a little bit of a story about something that happened to me. And this is a process that I do have in my own business about setting expectations. But I had a meeting with a client. This was a client that hadn't hired me yet. So this is done beforehand. And we were going through some questions and things like that. And one of the first things they said was, don't worry. We're not going to have any arguments in front of you. We know that you're not a marriage counselor, and we're going to definitely come to you with the united front on our decisions. Doesn't that sound amazing? Well, the reason that conversation even came about was because I had put this together in what I call my FAQ sheet, which was sent to the client before they hired me. So an FAQ sheet is just going to talk about frequently asked questions that are coming up from your potential clients or your clients. And you're going to start paying attention to those because I've had so many people say, well, they're always asking me this, or they're always wondering that, or they want to know how the process works or what's next. Why don't you answer that ahead of time? So why don't you tell them the rules of the game, like what it is to engage with you, how that's going to look? It's going to change your interaction with them because they now know what to expect. A lot of times, especially if they've never hired a designer before or they've never worked with you before, they want to know like what to expect. What are the rules of the game? How's this timing going to work? What's going to happen? So there's the way that you can address this is through some FAQs. And again, the timing of this is you want to be giving them this information before you're hired, not in your welcome packet after you've been hired, but beforehand, because this is also showing them that this is what it's going to be to work with me. And if they have any kind of problems or issues or questions about how that is and what that boundary is, you can answer it right now, right ahead of time and reestablish how that is moving forward. And then secondly, if they have a real problem with one of the things that's in your FAQ sheet or FAQs, you can know that now. And then you can adjust whether or not you want to work with them. So that's the other thing is like all of this is creating an opportunity for you to as accurately as you can, pre-assess someone as to whether or not this is going to be a good fit. If they have a problem with some of your fundamental FAQs, then it's probably going to be difficult moving forward. So one of the beautiful things, and I alluded to it earlier, is one of the beautiful things about putting together some frequently asked questions, some FAQs in your business, it allows you to really think about like, what are the deal breakers that if a client doesn't agree to this, we're not going to be able to work together. It's not going to be a good experience for both of us. Or what are those common questions that come up that might be somewhat uncomfortable to answer, especially if you're an introvert? Everybody, those introverts out there in the audience, raise their hand. When those uncomfortable questions come up, a lot of times if we get them on the spot, we will totally freeze. And we sort of just go, like, how about the one where somebody says, were you going to share your discount with me? A lot of us get that over and over again. Why don't you start putting that in your FAQs, explaining why you're not sharing your discount and what that means and how you're providing a whole bunch of other services, which are why you're making a profit on things that you sell. So the FAQs do two things. One is it sets the boundary, like you get to decide what goes in your FAQs, and then you get to thoughtfully answer those in a time frame where you can put your, you can really think about what you want that answer to be and how you want to sort of politically answer that question as opposed to, do you share your discount with me? And you'd be like, oh, hell no. So this gives us a way to craft that message and to look at that. And what it does also is it prepares us for when we do get asked that question, because you're still going to get asked that question at some point off the cuff. You're already going to know what your answer is because you've put it together in your FAQ sheet. So those things are super, super important. And then the other thing is it just creates that boundary in terms of like, these are my rules of engagement. These are my big things that I'm like really basically not willing to change, or this is how it works. This is how you're going to be working with me. These are the parameters of how you work with me. And I'm going to bring you back to the story that I told you earlier, which was a client said to me, I know you're not a marriage counselor. We're not going to have an argument in front of you. So in my FAQ sheet, the question is, what happens if my spouse and I do not agree on the direction we should take? And there I answer it. And I was like, listen, you guys are welcome to disagree. We get it. And I'm going to be bringing things up to you that you may have never thought of before, or that may seem like a little bit out of what you were expecting, because when you hire a designer, you're probably not going to get exactly what you're expecting. You're going to get more than that, right? Because you're not a designer. So sometimes you're presenting items and concepts and ideas to clients that they would have never thought of in their wildest dreams. But you know, as a designer, because you've heard what they're telling you, that this is the right choice, right? And there are times when one spouse may be kind of caught off guard on that, or one has decided that they don't like that idea and the other one just absolutely loves that idea. And so I'm giving you that advice ahead of time. I'm saying, great, why don't you go have these discussions at home, behind closed doors? I don't want to be in front of an argument. And I'm basically saying in a nice way, I'm not a marriage counselor. I'm not here to mediate those conversations, but I want you as adults to go back, call through the information, decide what's important and discuss it amongst yourselves, and then come back with your decision. And that is why somebody said to me, we're not a marriage counselor and we're not going to bicker in front of you. Actually, these two people happen to be the nicest people in the world, and I don't think they ever bickered, but it was a hilarious moment because I was actually seeing these boundaries, like they were totally on board with it. They were totally cool with it. And I had set that expectation up front. And I didn't have to have that uncomfortable conversation directly in front of somebody while it was happening. So again, like the timing of this is that you want to be sending this before you're hired because you're allowing them to look at the information, digest the information, and then react to the information. So some of the things that so say there's 10 FAQs that I have that I present to people, they are only going to really bring up the things that bother them or that they have questions on. So generally, most of them they're fine with. So think about that. Instead of going over 10 things in a meeting with them, what if they only had question on one thing? How does this work? Can you explain this better? How would we handle something that you're presenting to me that we don't agree on in person? And of course, then you can get a little bit more specific and answer those questions like, I will answer any questions that you have about that and give you the pros and cons of the decisions that need to be made. But ultimately, you two are going to have to go back and make that decision together with the information that I provided. So putting an FAQ sheet together is incredibly helpful for you as a designer to decide what your boundaries are, and then you as a business as creating the rules of engagement with a client. So I want you to be thinking about what are some of the questions that you're getting over and over and over again that clients are asking. I'm going to give you a couple examples, but I want you to be thinking about that. And if you want to be putting this together in a way that is very complete and very thoughtful, I'm doing a free webinar called Sales for Introverts, and then moving into creating this sheet and along with a bunch of other sheets that we send ahead of time to clients to set expectations and to basically close the design process, the deal, so that we can get your close rate up and you can get better jobs. So one of the questions that I always get is, we've said it's a go. You've got that verbal, yep, we're all on board, everything's good, we want to do it. What happens next? Okay, so then in my FAQs sheet, I'm exactly explaining that while verbally you may say it's a go, these are the two things that have to happen for you to actually secure your spot on the calendar, for the project to begin, for you to find out when we're going to start, right? Generally, it's a signature and money. So a signature on a design agreement and money. So what I'm doing is actually telling them, great, I'm glad you said we're good to go. But if you haven't done these other two things, we're actually not good to go. So we're creating that boundary as to what exactly it means when we're saying we're ready to go. It doesn't mean that we start tomorrow. So that's the other thing, is what's your timing? And you can keep it very generic, meaning based on the time that you sign the agreement and send the deposit, we will send you another communication as to when your project will start in our calendar. Easy enough. So these are things that people just want to know. They just want to know what the next thing is. I talk about, this is the one we always get is, why does everything take so long? Of course, we talk about those expectations of when clients are like, why could it possibly take months to put together finishes for an entire house? Like, we just all as designers kind of laugh at that. But clients are always asking, why does everything take so long? So we got to answer that question. Why does everything take so long? Why aren't you sharing your discount? If these are questions you're getting, what happens when I find something online that I love, or that I'm out shopping at a store and I see something that I love? What happens then? What do I do? Right? So you need to be answering those based on what you want from that client. If you don't ever want them to be shopping for anything without you, then you have to answer the question, what if they're out and they find something? What if they're online and they see something? What do you want them to do? So why don't you tell them what you want them to do and think about that? I always get this one too. Have my items been ordered yet? We're going to say, if you haven't received a formal quote from us and then provided payment, your items have not been ordered. And don't forget, this is the other thing that so many designers have said, well, I put it in my welcome packet, or I told them about it, or it's in my agreement. Think of clients and this is no offense to clients, but think of clients and 8-year-old children. How many times have you told your children to empty the dishwasher, take out the garbage, do their homework? Thousands of times. Same with clients. They're not going to remember every piece of information that you give them. They're not going to think of it as important as you do, as the designer who's, doing all the work. You have to remember there's gentle ways to continually remind them. And that's the other thing is so many designers talk about how clients don't respect boundaries. There's a lot of texting going on all hours of the day and night. And you have to think about this. It is your responsibility to enforce the boundary. And that is where we tend to fall short, is that when a client texts us in off hours, we feel, and this is on us, that we have to answer that text. Well, you don't have to answer that text because you need to enforce your boundary. If you don't want them texting you at all, because I know that's also another big thing, you can discuss how you can text to email or what your texting policy is. That is also in my FAQ sheet, is what my texting policy is. I also talk about what days I'll do meetings, and there's reasons for that. That's how I set up my own calendar. But, talk about communication. How often are you going to hear from me? What kind of information am I going to be receiving? Those sorts of things. So I want you to be thinking about what are clients continually asking you that you're also finding frustrating, or that you're worried about answering on the fly, that are uncomfortable. Some of this could be about budgeting. There's so many things that client asks us that simply many times we think they're trying to be, trying to go around us or find out ways to find out how much money we're making. And some of it simply is they just don't know. They just don't know. They want to know what the rules of the game are. So I think that you should start putting together those kinds of answers to questions that you're continually being asked. And even if questions, if you don't want to put them in your FAQ sheet, like something that is formally either on your website or in your packet, I wouldn't call it a welcome packet because this is before you're hired, any of those things, but you continually are getting certain questions that it kind of flusters you and you don't know how to answer. Think about how you would answer that in a moment of quietness, in a moment of clarity, because that's going to also help you work through a lot of other things. You're going to feel so much more confident and more prepared when that question comes up. I did have a designer come to me that I was coaching, and she said they all want to know how much things cost. And many of you have probably run into that as well. So we have a low, medium, and high budget sheet that we give to our coaching clients and help them work through that. But she was also specifically talking about construction. People want to know what construction costs us. And she was doing a lot of kitchen renovations at various levels, full boat renovations, where were gutting the walls. But then also she was doing some cosmetic renovations where they were just painting cabinets or maybe changing a few finishes. So I asked her, because she had this information. She just didn't really think about that she had this information. I asked her to go back and look at her past 3 projects and do a case study internally on her own in terms of where those things ended up. Where did counters end up? Where did construction end up? Where did cabinet handles end up? Where were you? And then trying to put together those budget information. We're designers. We always want to look forward, but we never want to look back. And there's a lot of information that's happened in our business. If we go back and look at history, that we can actually empower ourselves to have actual hard numbers to tell people. Now, I'm always a proponent of you always give somebody a range in terms of what things cost or what they could expect. Because of course, how many times have somebody said to you, I'm not going to hold you to it, but what's the number? That could also go into your FAQ sheet. I'm not going to hold you to it, but we all know that they do. So you can go back and do some case studies on previous projects to really get some information as to what things cost. Again, this comes back to boundaries. is when you're talking to a client and somebody says, I want to do a kitchen for $20,000. If you've done your homework and you've never done a kitchen for less than $125,000, you can honestly, very confidently say, I'm sorry, that's not possible because my last three projects were from 75 to 125 and you're at 25. So we're at an impasse here. So start thinking about commonly asked questions that you're getting from clients and ways that you can answer them to as completely as possible, right? And start creating this FAQ sheet. If you guys are interested in learning more about how to handle uncomfortable conversations and if sales and marketing is kind of not your thing, I would love to invite you to my Sales for Introverts workshop, which is coming up. I have the waitlist open in my bio. You can go ahead and sign up for that. I'm just getting ready to set that date. It's coming up real soon. But think about the FAQ sheet in your own business and how you can answer those commonly asked questions so that you can really start setting the boundaries and setting those expectations with clients. If you have any commonly FAQ items that you're already putting together, I would love to hear about them because, we're always trying to make it as complete as possible. But think about FAQs, and I hope you start setting expectations and setting boundaries with your clients ASAP. And I will see you next week, Wednesday at 12. And I'm so glad you joined me today. Thank you so much. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and I will see you soon. Bye, everybody. Take care.